Jaya Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada, Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada, 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 Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Gurudev, 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 Gurudev. Nitai Gora Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol. Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol.
Hare Krishna, everyone. Hare Krishna. Jai. Srila Tamal Krishna Goswami Gurudev Vyasa Puja ki. Jai. So now I would like to welcome everyone for the most auspicious Vyasa Puja of Srila Gurudev. And I hope everyone is comfortable here. Okay, without wasting, because we are already late. So without wasting our time, I would like to invite now senior disciples to speak so that we are on time. So I would like to invite first His Grace Satadanya Prabhuji. He is a Prabhupada's disciple. Now you decide, Prabhuji. So you can come, Prabhuji. So His Grace Satadanya Prabhuji is a very close friend of Srila Gurudev and very senior disciple of Srila Prabhupada and stays in Mayapur. So welcome, Prabhuji. Please. Hare Krishna. So now we are inviting His Grace Hari Sri Prabhuji to say a few words for Srila Gurudev in glorification of Srila Gurudev. I don't have need to introduce Prabhuji because he is a well-known disciple, secretary of Srila Gurudev, Srila Prabhupada. Sorry. So Prabhupada Gurudev Maharaj.
Namaram Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Nityanamane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gaudavani Pracharane Nirvisesha Sunyavadi Paschacha Deshatarane Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Panchakul Kalpatarubhyascha, Kripasindu Bevacha, Pajitanam Pavanebhyo, Vaishnavebhyo, Namo Namaha, Srila Tamal Krishna Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. I need some water. I'm drying. Some water. Okay, so I've been asked to speak. I think Sadadani Prabhu is more qualified to say something than me, but he's hoping that the time will run out before he has to get up and speak himself. So where to begin? I first met Tamal Krishna Maharaj in 1975. Thank you. It was my first visit to India. And that year, of course, we opened the Krishna Balaram Mandir. And so the festival program, Go Purnima through till Ram Navami, it was about 6 weeks, I think, at that time. Anyway, so I had my first personal exchange with Tamal Krishna Maharaj on the train going from Calcutta down to Hyderabad. Hyderabad. They had reserved a certain amount of seats on the trains. And although I was a householder, fairly newly married householder, my wife was in Australia. I came for the festival. And then we went to, at the end of the Mayapur leg, we went to Howrah. I think it was Howrah. Would have been Howrah, right? And so I saw all the brahmacharis are in one carriage and the householders were in another one. So I thought, well, I'm not with my wife, so that makes me a brahmachari. So I got on the train and immediately some of the senior brahmacharis, Buddhi came. Hey, what are you doing? You're on the wrong carriage. Go off and go with the householders. So I was using my best wits to try and stay there. So I refused to go. And I told him I'm not with my wife, so that makes me a brahmachari. So then a few minutes later, then he came back and Tamal Krishna Goswami was with him. So I immediately started getting on my case. I was arguing back, but of course you can't argue with Tamal, so I got tossed off the carriage. I had to go and sit with the householders. It sounds ridiculous nowadays, but that was, our neophyte mentality. So that was my first exchange with Tamal Krishna Maharaj. He had a reputation, obviously. Anyway, fortunately, things took a turn for the better later on. But let's see. Tamal Krishna Maharaj was the first GBC before there were any GBCs. Yeah, before Prabhupada formed an actual GBC body, Tamal Krishna Maharaj had already distinguished himself as a manager. He was managing on the West Coast. Prabhupada's movement was just beginning to start taking hold. And I think this is going to be a bit sporadic, but I think that they just, they may have just got that Lasyanika Boulevard temple in LA. And the push was on to start distributing at least back to Godheads, and some books were coming out. So Tamal Krishna Maharaj, right from the day he joined practically, was managing. That was his forte. He was just a natural manager. He knew how to organize people. And so Prabhupada was negotiating with Dai Nippon. They were a big printer from Japan. And Prabhupada was trying to get them to be the printer for Back to Godhead. But they were a big company, so I think they could only do like 20,000 issues. That was the smallest amount that they could handle. So he got in touch with Tamal Krishna Maharaj and asked him, this is the situation, we need to buy 20,000 BTGs every month and then they'll print it. And at that time, we were only selling 2,000 or 3,000 a month. So Tamal Krishna Maharaj gave Prabhupada his assurance that if you get the magazines printed, I'll make sure that they get distributed. So he did that. We ordered the 20,000, and then immediately the number of magazines that we were buying and distributing went up from Jananivas Prabhu Ki Jai. So on Tamal Krishna Maharaj's say-so, they ordered 20,000, which was way more than what they were doing. But somehow or another, Tamal Krishna Maharaj, he managed to fulfill that commitment for many years. So not long after that, I think he went to England. I don't have the dates fixed up. I haven't read this for a long time. But he went to England on Prabhupada's request. The three householder couples that were there, Shyamasundar and Malati, Mukunda and, what was the name? Mukunda and Janaki, yeah. And who was the other one? I can't hear what you're saying. Mukunda and Shamsundar and Malati, Mukunda and Janaki, Gurudas and Jamuna. You have to excuse me, my brain doesn't work sometimes. So they were there. Things were beginning to take off in England, but it was getting a little disorganized. There was no real managerial person there. So Tamal Krishna Maharaj was asked by Prabhupada to go to England and organize the Sankirtan party. So he did that. And then whilst he was there was a few devotees in Paris, and I think a couple in Germany. So they had, when he arrived, they asked him, please come and help us organize. So he was doing that so you could say that without being a GBC, because there wasn't one at that time, but still he was the GBC because he was the first individual to exhibit his capabilities in handling other numbers of devotees. So I think he wrote to Prabhupada and told him that I've been to Paris and I've been to Germany. And then Prabhupada wrote back and he said, no, why are you doing this? Go back to England immediately. He said, I didn't send you over, just to do France or Germany. I sent you to get the English yatra together. But actually, Prabhupada was very happy with what he was doing. So you could say he was like the first GBC. A few months afterwards, Prabhupada did actually, in July of 70, he did actually form an official GBC body. And of course, Tamal Krishna Maharaj was on that. So, Hare Krishna. Let's see. So, anyway, so he distinguished himself right from the very beginning. Prabhupada knew he was a very capable person, and also philosophically he was very sound. So later on, then in 1975, as I said, that was when I first came here to Mayapur and India. Tamal Krishna Maharaj was, heading things up quite nicely. He was the first official GBC for India. I think for nearly 3-4 years, that was his service. And then in 74, he was he was in the middle of the battle with Mr. Nair in Bombay. You can read that in Giriraj Maharaj's book, I'll Build You a Temple. So Tamal Krishna Maharaj was one of the main personalities involved in that tussle with Mr. Nair, who was trying to cheat us, or cheat Prabhupada, of the land in Juhu Beach. So at some point, Tamal Krishna Maharaj became a little overburdened. He'd had 4 years in India, and it's a very taxing time. So after the GBC meetings, he revealed to the other GBCs that he didn't want to be in India anymore. He wanted to go back and preach in the West for some time. So Prabhupada allowed him to do that, and he took up this new service of running the Radha Damodar traveling Sankirtan party. And over the next couple of years, he transformed the book distribution and the management to some extent of ISKCON in India. He, I think he was, well, by the time I came to India, they were collecting about $50,000 a month for the BBT, and they were distributing at least 20,000 big books, Bhagavatam, and then the Chaitanya Charitamrita came out. So it was. He went from when he left India, he had gone to join his old friend Vishnu Jan Swami, and they had this one bus with the deities of Radha Damodar installed, and he was touring from one college to another, and they would sit on the campus, set up the deities in a proper traveling altar, and then they do a little musical presentation, do some chanting, and then the students would come in out of, inquisitiveness, I guess. But whoever was attracted, they would come. And then Tamal Krishna Maharaj would sit them down and he'd preach to them. And practically they were getting like 1 or 2 new men every month as he was traveling around. You'll see in those days, there's some pictures of Maharaj. He's got these horn-rimmed glasses, black, very thick frames. So when he put them on, and it gave him a very stern demeanor. Later on, he told me, he said, I bought those glasses especially because when anybody came and inquired, it gave him this aura of being like a very heavy kind of person. And he told me, he said, it gave me the ability to get them, preach to them whilst I what's the word? Well, anyway, so that was the team. Radha Damodar and Vishnu Jan, and then Tamal Krishna Maharaj was taking care of the preaching. And by 1976, he had, I think, 6 or 7 Greyhound buses, about 130 brahmacharis, and they were distributing phenomenal amounts of literature. So without any ambiguity, he was the best preacher in ISKCON. And Prabhupada recognized that. He was the most capable of his disciples. So he was very, very happy with him. So at the beginning of 76, I had just joined Prabhupada's personal party, December 75. So Prabhupada came and spent some months here in Mayapur in 76. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj flew in from America for the month of January 1976 to get a bit of personal association with Prabhupada. That was a system that Prabhupada had set up in 1970 when he formed the GBC. He wanted to have a permanent GBC secretary to do his personal stuff. And at the same time, any GBC could book in as part of Prabhupada's traveling party for at least 1 month. So Tamal Krishna Maharaj had signed up for the month of January, and he arrived on the 1st of January, I think, 76. Prabhupada was in Bombay, and within a few hours of Tamal Krishna Maharaj's arrival, we were on the airplane to Madras. Yes, Madras. And so there was Prabhupada, myself, Tamal Krishna Goswami, and in Madras, there was Mahamsa Swami, Guru Kripa Swami had come for a few days. So like this, as Prabhupada traveled, then we became good friends. I think I can say that. I wasn't on an equal par, obviously, but our relationship blossomed because we were serving Prabhupada together. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj knew that he couldn't, he couldn't push me too far because I was Prabhupada's servant. And so you got something like a special dispensation. So we flew down to Madras. We stayed at a life member's house for a couple of days. Then on the 3rd of 3rd of January, let me see what I was going to say. We went from Madras to a place called Nellore, and Prabhupada did a series of pandals there in Nellore. I had one little exchange with Tamal Krishna Maharaj because whenever the BBT brought out a new book, they would have 2 copies, especially like gold-leafed, and Tamal Krishna Maharaj brought with him the newly published 6th canto. So one of those copies Prabhupada gave to the chief minister or some big shot. Anyway, he was the chief guest at our panel. So Prabhupada gave him one of his own personal copies of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So the other copy I was keeping with me. So I was reading it every day, getting absorbed in its contents. So one morning after the morning program, Tamal Krishna Maharaj, he hinted that there's this new Bhagavatam, so there's only one copy, so I'd like to read it. So I was about halfway through. So I said, "Oh, fine, Maharaj, when I'm finished with it, I'll give it to you." So he became so annoyed, but he couldn't say too much, because Prabhupada was in the next room. And he made some remark. He said, "I'm a sannyasi, you should have given it to me first." So I was thinking, well, okay, if you're a sannyasi, behave like somebody who's renounced. I didn't tell him that, but that's what I was thinking. And he knew that I was thinking that. Anyway, apart from that, after that, we settled in as part of Prabhupada's team. We had 1 month traveling around, and he always treated me, almost like an equal, although we weren't by any means. But he was very warm and friendly and encouraging. And that became the standard of our relationship. When other people used to, and still do sometimes, tell you stories about how heavy he was and, pushy. But actually, I never experienced that heavy side of him, at least not on towards myself. We had a different kind of relationship, which was very friendly and cooperative. So I ended up having 3 one-month spells with Tamal Krishna Maharaj on the party. January 76, he was there for 1 month. What was the other ones? I think that the whole month of January 76, and then the month of February 77, Tamal came back on the party then. And then, of course, he was made the permanent secretary of Srila Prabhupada in 77. So I had another month or so serving Prabhupada with Tamal Krishna Maharaj. So I'm sorry, my brain's not working. Anyway, so we got on very well together. I was there with him. There was a small group. Sadadanya was there in October of 1977, Prabhupada's last month on the planet. Tamal Krishna Maharaj, of course, had been the full-time secretary for practically the whole year. When in 77, when Tamal Krishna Maharaj, he came to join Prabhupada's party here in Mayapur. So that was a very kind of quiet time. January, February 77, not many people were coming to Mayapur. So Prabhupada had a chance to relax. He was very sick. He'd been getting weaker and weaker from... anyway, so 1977, Prabhupada had been down to Bhubaneswar. He had done the foundation stone ceremony for the temple there. And then we came up from Bhubaneswar back to Mayapur. And then Tamal Krishna Maharaj flew in from America for his 1 month of visiting GBC. So just after he arrived, I remember sitting up in the servants' room there, and we were just talking over the situation. Prabhupada was getting very, very weak, and so I had been with Prabhupada for 16 months at that time, and I started to feel that my time was up. I'd had nearly a year and a half with Prabhupada, and I felt that now Prabhupada wants me to go out and preach. I didn't talk to him directly about it, but I did talk with Tamal Krishna Maharaj, and that this is my feeling now. I've had a lot of personal training. Now I feel that I should go out and use that for preaching. And he revealed to me that he was thinking in the opposite direction. He had done so much work over the 8 years that he'd been in the movement at that time. And they'd done all the preaching that Prabhupada had wanted. They made a lot of remarkable development. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj was acknowledged as being, the number one preacher in America, at least, if not the world. So he told me, he said, well, actually, you're thinking about leaving the party. I'm thinking about coming on to the party. He said, because in the 8 years that I've been with him, I've never really spent time with Prabhupada. And he said, now I just feel like I want to become Prabhupada's full-time secretary, and whatever time that he has left on the planet, I want to be there, whether it's 1 year or 10 years. But I just feel a need now to do Prabhupada's personal service and be his personal secretary. So a few days later, I think they had the GBC meetings. He had spoken with Prabhupada about him becoming the personal secretary, and Prabhupada had agreed, but he said the GBC have to agree. So that was, he attended the GBC meetings in 77, and the GBC officially made him Prabhupada's permanent secretary. So then right after that was, of course, when Prabhupada got very sick. We won't go into all the details about that. But he very expertly took care of Srila Prabhupada. Personally, I knew I wasn't capable of doing that more intimate bodily service, but Tamal Krishna, and I understood that Krishna is prompting me to go now, and that he wanted Tamal Krishna Maharaj to look after him. So anyway, it was a difficult time, but I came back. Let's see. And in February of '77, that was when he became the secretary. I left the party, but I booked in with Tamal Krishna Maharaj to be the visiting GBC secretary for the month of October. So, having done that, I went back to Australia. So anyway, then due to Prabhupada's extreme ill health, he didn't go with the rest of the devotees to Vrindavan for that second leg of what used to be the Mayapur Vrindavan festival, but which is nowadays the Gaur Purnima festival. Anyway, so I booked in as the visiting secretary. I arrived in Bombay on September the 29th of '77. Prabhupada had come back from his last trip to England, and he was waiting for the work to be completed on the Jewel Beach Temple, and we were supposed to have the anyway, I arrived on September the 29th, and when I arrived in Bombay, it was like 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. So I stayed for one day. The same evening, Tamal Krishna Maharaj called all the senior men. I don't think you were there at that time. He called all the senior men in to his room and asked us, now, what should I do? Should I stay in Bombay for the opening, or should I go to Vrindavan? And so one by one, individually, we had to say whether which option. When it was my turn, I was hesitant to make a vote because I'd just arrived and I wasn't fully tuned into what was happening, what the mood was. Anyway, one by one, we had to say Vrindavan or Bombay. So I asked Prabhupada, is it for health or is it for preaching? So Prabhupada said it's for health. So then it was very clear what he wanted us to do. So the same night I flew to Delhi. The next morning, I went out with Bhagavata Sri Prabhu, who was the TP in Delhi at that time. And we purchased that double bed that's in Prabhupada's rooms there. We went over everything that we would need in order to look after Prabhupada in a comfortable way. So we got that big bed, put that in where the darsham room used to be. And then I rang up Tamal Krishna Maharaj and told him, okay, we've set things up. So if you want, you can come now. So there was a problem in that the Mathura Vrindavan road was kind of wrecked. It was the end of the rainy season. There was an airstrike going on at the same time. So Tamal Krishna Maharaj made the arrangement to go by railway. So they came on the overnight train from Bombay to Mathura. They arrived, I guess, about 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning. And Brahmananda, he was there, and a few others. Everybody got off the train. Finally, Tamal Krishna Maharaj, and then followed by Brahmananda Maharaj. And he came out of the carriage cradling he was how he was holding Prabhupada in his arms, the same way that you would cradle the baby. Anyway, recently I wrote a book on that last month in Vrindavan. So that whole history is written down in some detail there. One thing that I do remember is that when we arrived at the temple from Mathura, we carried Prabhupada into his room there. He lay back for a couple of minutes. And then he said, one thing is, I have to thank Tamal Krishna for taking me to London and bringing me back without any difficulty. So he was very happy with that service. And I saw that the nature of the service became very intimate and intense. Prabhupada put himself completely in the hands of Tamal Krishna Maharaj. He wouldn't do anything without discussing with Tamal first. And I'm going to stop here. I can't. Anyway, it was the exchanges between Tamal Krishna Maharaj and Prabhupada at that time were, I'd never seen anything as intimate. Prabhupada relied on him and trusted him as his best man. There's no doubt about that at all. So I don't know, I'll finish at this point, get started, then Prabhu can say something. Tamal Krishna Maharaj ki jai. Prabhupada ki go Prabhupada.
His Grace Hari Sri Prabhu ki jai. Thank you. Thank you, Prabhuji, so much. I would like to invite devotees, humbly ask devotees, please move forward so that other devotees can sit. Okay. Please move forward. The devotees are still coming. So now I'd like to invite His Grace Sadadanya Prabhu to speak something from Srila Gurudev. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna. Sorry is a hard act to follow, but I'll try my best. Tamal Krishna Maharaj, Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pastaya Bhaktale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namani. Namaste Saraswati Deve Guruvani Pachani Nivisesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshatadine. Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. It's clear? Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Of course, hello? You can hear? Yeah. Of course, when I knew when Tamal Krishna Maharaj was he was the only GBC of India. He spent quite a bit of time in Mayapur, and we became very close. And again, of course, from the end of May 77 till Prabhupada's disappearance in November 77, excluding the trip to London, I was there in Vrindavan, actually by the good office of Tamal Krishna Maharaj. He brought me in as, because of Prabhupada's weak condition, Upendra was the body servant, so then Tamal Krishna decided they needed two body servants, and he called me the attendant. So we had a lot of association together serving Srila Prabhupada. And as I've told before, at least 75, 80% of my personal services to Srila Prabhupada was Prabhupada would say, call Tamal. Call Tamal. And just if you know Prabhupada's house in Vrindavan, now the physical space had changed. It was a small space where he had a small desk, like the Marwari desk, and a cushion. So when Prabhupada would say, call Tamal, I would go to that next small room and say, Tamal, Prabhupada's calling. And I've never seen, like Hari Prabhu said, Tamal Krishna's, Maharaja's relationship with Prabhupada was something very unique, even unthinkable for most of us, other God brothers. But I remember one time going and I said, Prabhupada's calling you. And then he said, tell him I'm taking prashad. I'll come right after. My eyes were widened. So I went in and I told Prabhupada that Tamal is taking prashad. He said, oh, okay. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Huh? Yeah, I know there's no electricity. I thought you had another system. Of course, the other system is my big mouth. Yeah. So before I tell the story I was going to tell, I would just like to say that I know there's no other devotee, and I've known them all throughout the years of ISKCON. I joined at 61 Second Avenue. That was the second storefront across the street on a diagonal from 26 Second Avenue. But I don't know of any other devotee, be it a Maharaj or present day guru or whatever the case may be, who, when I think of or when I see his picture, really, it makes me think of Prabhupada. And that's what a devotee is supposed to do. It's supposed to make you think of Krishna and Prabhupada. And because every breath practically he took, and every action he made, and every service he performed was for and on behalf of Prabhupada. One day he told me, I think this is where that saying came from. He said, Sharadanya, he said, you and I, we're Prabhupada men. Prabhupada men. So a Prabhupada man. In fact, the Madhvacharya Sampradaya has a saying that Madhva, the Acharya, he's like, you know, in South India, they have those huge big pots, big drum type pots with the brass handles. So the Madhvas, they say that Madhva Acharya is like a huge drum or pot of paramanna, sweet rice. Paramanna, sweet rice. And that his disciples, even after the disappearance of Madhva, the only other purpose of any other Diksha guru or disciple of Prabhupada is to be like a chamach. In the big drum, you put a big spoon, like they serve khichdi here in the Shulab, the big kitchen. They have those big spoons and they spoon out the khichdi. Similarly, any guru, God brother, or whatever the case may be, disciple of Srila Prabhupada and his grand disciples and so forth, should simply function as a chamach, as a big spoon to dip into the sweet rice of Srila Prabhupada's activities and teachings and distribute it to others. That is their only function. And if they're not doing that, well, that would be another talk, which I'm not going to go into now. But that is so Tamal Krishna Maharaj, when I know personally, just when I see him or think of him or on these occasions, it's simply a reminder, smartabhyak satatam vishnur bismartabhyo najatuchi. The foremost rule and regulation is to always remember Krishna and never forget Krishna. So Tamal Krishna Maharaj, being like practically the Adi or original Prabhupada man really serves that function, at least for me, and I'm sure for a lot of you also. Now I'll just tell one story. I don't know if it was June or July 77, but Yasodanandan Swami was there, and Bhakti Prem Swami, was it? Yeah, Bhakti Prem Swami. And the discussions were about the universe, fifth canto Srimad Bhagavatam. And there were some ongoing discussions on a daily basis. And I was only there by dint of my services, but I was not actually so erudite on the fifth canto or on the structure of the universe. But I remember on one particular day, they were discussing, someone brought up that the earth is flat, according to Bhagavatam. Now, I don't remember reading in fifth canto that the earth is flat, but it talked about the, what is the name of the, Bhumandal. No, there's another word. What is it? Maybe, but that whole, yeah, that whole Bhumandal. Not Bharatvarsha. But it's, yeah, more or less the Bhumandal and the, you said, Jambu Dweep, was more or less a plane, a flat plane. So we were discussing that, but someone was presenting, I don't know if it was Yasodanandan Maharaj or whatever at that time, that they interpreted it that the earth was flat. Immediately I thought that's not correct, but Tamal Krishna had as has been said, he was, this is just an aside, he was so extremely intelligent that at the same time, it follows that he was a bit of a controller, or quite a bit. But due to his great intelligence, but he started taking up, and he was very intense. Intense is a euphemism. He was very intense. He could be very intense. So he took up the argument that the earth is flat. And he gave the example that if I take a plane, if I take a flight from San Francisco, from Los Angeles, and I go east, no, I go west, eventually I'm going to come back to the east in New York. If I go from Los Angeles, I keep going straight in an airplane, I'm going to eventually come back to New York. Now I'm getting a little mixed because he was taking the argument that it's flat. So anyway, there was a back and forth. And I even said that I remember reading in the fifth canto, not that the Bhumandal is flat, but that it's curved like the petal of a lotus. And then Prabhupada said, yes, that is correct. It's curved. So I said, even if you don't consider it round, there's a curvature. Then Prabhupada said, yes, it's like the petal of a lotus. And then Prabhupada, it was in that, there's a small room off his sitting room where Prabhupada would take prasad. Of course, now they don't have that small Vyasa in that exact place where he took prasad. They have it behind some ropes inside with the palanquin. But Prabhupada would sit there. He actually got up and he went to the wall and he put his hand on the wall and he said, here is Los Angeles. And he said, you can go to New York like this or like that, just by the curvature, whether the earth was flat or round or whatever it was. So Tamal Krishna didn't exactly buy that argument, and he kept pushing it, and he pushed it a little intensely. And then at one point, when Prabhupada was back sitting down, he said, he didn't say, he yelled that, you are prejudiced. You are prejudiced. And that kind of ended the whole conversation at that time. Tamal felt very bad. He had spoke to me also. And later in the afternoon, he went to Prabhupada and he apologized for being so intense and for making an offense. Prabhupada told him, offense? What makes you think there was any offense? There was no such offense. There is no offense. So he had a very, as Hari Sari Prabhu described, a very intimate relationship with Prabhupada. And as Hari Sari Prabhu also said, in those last months, he told him that you took me to London, you can, and we were talking about going to Mayapur. We were talking about even going to the Pennsylvania farm. He told Tamal, I am completely in your hands. You have taken me, you have brought me here, you took me to London, you have brought me back here. Whatever you say, I will do. I'm completely in your hands. So, Tamal Krishna Maharaj, I would say, is the sunam bonum of a Prabhupada man whom, upon talking about or describing his service to Prabhupada, or by even seeing his picture, serves to remind us all of Srila Prabhupada. And he is the real chamach, a real chamach, I would say a golden chamach, dipping into the philosophy, character, pastimes, and activities and prachar of Srila Prabhupada and giving it out to all of us. So all glories to Srila Tamal Krishna Goswami Maharaj on his Vyasa Puja day.
And thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you, His Grace. His Grace, Satyadanya Prabhu ki jai. Now I would like to invite His Grace, Jananivas Prabhu. If you can come and speak some more. Everyone knows Jananivas Prabhu. I don't have to speak so much about Jananivas Prabhu. He's a senior devotee, disciple of Srila Prabhupada. So thank you for coming, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much for the invitation to be in your association. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Tamal Krishna Goswami Maharaj ki jai. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. I first met Tamal Krishna Maharaj in Calcutta Radha Govindaji temple there, 1971. And he was acting like an elder brother for me. He was really looking after me, taking care of me. I just joined there. And I think he gave me his bead bag, which was a yellow color at that time. So he gave me a bead bag and it's like a chant japa, and gave me a dhoti, yellow dhoti. So he was always very kind. It was one time I was leaving Calcutta Temple, and I was going up to the bus stop to get the bus to get a train to Benares, where Pankajangri was staying. So I hadn't seen him for a long time because I got caught up in Calcutta and initiated everything. Anyway, I was standing at the bus stop, and then suddenly someone was running up the road. And he got to me and he came up to me and he said, "Where are you going? What are you doing? You're leaving us?" I said, "Well, I have to go and see my brother. I haven't seen him for a long time. He doesn't know where I am. I don't know where he is, but somehow or another." He said, "Well, you stay here. Somehow or another we'll arrange." And he was giving me all these excuses, I guess, why I should go back. It's very dangerous out there. It's the material world, you know that, and you're alone and you're having... I said, I know that, but he said, "Somebody said something to you? Somebody upset you? That Chaitanya Maharaj said something?" I said, no, nobody said anything. I just got to go and see my brother. I said, "I promise I'll come back." So like that, he was so concerned, quite rightly so. I was just going to wander. At that time, I was just wandering around. I had nothing to gain, nothing to lose. But he was so concerned that I don't get into Maya, I guess. So he was my savior. So he's a very extremely powerful person. He was Tawan Kanti Ghosh, who was a minister or one minister in Bengal. He had a home minister. He had a newspaper also, I believe. And he was friendly with Prabhupada. And so he invited us to his birthday party. And so we were having a kirtan. We were standing in his deity room. He has gone to deities. He offers his newspapers to every morning. But I was standing next to Tamal like this, and he was playing kartal. It was so intense, and he was just chanting and chanting. And suddenly I became like frozen, and I couldn't move. And I thought, my body's not moving. I couldn't. It wasn't scary or anything like that, but it was just I can't move from this, and it's coming from this powerful kirtan. He's chanting Hare Krishna. He's very powerful. After that, I really respected him he's a really powerful person. So once this was at the end of Prabhupada's Leela, and Bhakti Tri Maharaj was telling me this story. And Bhakti Tri Maharaj heard from the Kaviraj, who was speaking in Bengali, that probably Prabhupada's going to leave. It must have been the Amrit Yoga, some auspicious time. The Kaviraj said, "I think Prabhupada will leave because he stopped eating, he stopped drinking, taking anything that day. So these are all symptoms that he's going to leave his body. So he was speaking in Bengali. So Bhakti Sri Maharaj understood, no one else understood. So Bhakti Sri Maharaj went back in the next room where Tamal Krishna Maharaj was there, Bhavananda and Bhakti Sri. And he told him what the Kaviraj said. They said, what are we going to do? How are we going to express this to the devotees? Who's going to express it to the devotees? The Prabhupada's going to leave. So he didn't even think about Prabhupada leaving because he wasn't going to leave. So it was never a top. But now he said, what are we going to do? What's the next step? And Prabhupada leaves. What's the next step? We haven't thought about this because our heart says that Prabhupada would never leave. So then he went in and he was telling, he told Tamal, he told Bhavananda what had happened. And Prabhupada will most probably be leaving in the evening during the Amrita Yoga or something, auspicious time. So anyway, they said, what should we do? And then he said, suddenly, there was such an intense vibration that they all jumped up at once, the three of them, and just ran into the next room where Prabhupada was laying on the bed. And he had just left. He had already just left moments before that. And anyway, a few weeks later, there was one Mataji, she had a dream, Vishakshalini, she married Prabhat. Remember Prabhat? Prabhat? Yeah. He married her, Vilakshini. She had a dream of Prabhupada. And she said, oh, Srila Prabhupada, where are you staying now? He said, oh, Goloka. And she said, why did you leave us like that? And Prabhupada said, well, I left like that, he said, because Tamal Krishna Maharaj, Bhavananda and Jayapataka, they are gentlemen. They are gentlemen. I did not like to leave in their presence. Srila Tamal Krishna Goswami Maharaj ki, Nitai Gaur Premanandi. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much, Janiniwas Prabhu, His Grace Jagannath Prabhu. His Grace Janiniwas Prabhu ki jai. Now I'd like to invite His Grace Mr. Bhagwan Prabhu ji to speak a few words, please.
Hare Krishna. Vanchakalpatarubhishya kripasindhabheva patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. My name is Mishra Bhagavan Das. I grew up on the west coast of the United States of America. When I was 15 years old, I went to a concert, actually a show called The Concert for Bangladesh, and which was here in actually all about Mayapur. It was George Harrison made a concert to raise money to give prasadam to people here in Mayapur when there was a war between India and Pakistan. So in that film, first I saw Rabbi Shankar, who's a Bengali, and he was playing this Indian music, which I'd never heard before. And he kept on, there was a sound that went whoop from the tabla. And I was wondering, what is that? And I thought, someday I'm going to find out what that instrument is, and I'm going to learn how to make that noise. And then George Harrison came onto the stage. He leaned into the microphone and said, Hare Krishna. And I was just amazed. Hare Krishna. I couldn't get it out of my mind. I went home and I was thinking, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. And this led to me moving into the Portland, Oregon temple when I was 16 years old in 1974. And Dinabandhu Prabhu was the temple president. And my parents had made an arrangement with him that I could live in the temple as I went to school. And it was a very nice temple. I probably could have continued on there for the next 2 years, going to school and being a brahmachari in the temple. But one day I was cleaning the basement floor, and I came across a stack of Back to Godhead magazines. And I opened one up, and there was this article by Tamal Krishna Goswami and Vishnu Jan Swami called the Radha Damodar Traveling Sankirtan Party. And in that magazine article, there was a picture of Tamal Krishna Maharaj and Vishnu Jan Swami side by side with the Radha Damodar deities. This picture's in the Servant of the Servant. And I looked at Tamal Krishna Goswami and Vishnu Jan Maharaj. I finished my service and I just sat down. I read the whole article and I thought, I have to be with him. So I got permission from the GBC to leave Portland and fly to Florida to be on the Radha Damodar party. I was recruited. Sometimes people would say that Tamal Krishna Maharaj was recruiting devotees from the temples. He didn't go around like preaching to people. I mean, this was just a magazine article, but it was enough that I was completely convinced that I had to be with him and join that party. So I got to Florida, to Gainesville, and on the lawn of the Gainesville temple was Vishnu Jan Swami with his whole band, his assembly with he had a devotee on the esaraj and a sitar and a tambura, and Tamal Krishna Goswami was playing Mridanga, and it was just the most beautiful sound. It's incredible. He was singing Gopinath, and there's you can find these bhajans with Vishnu Jan Swami on YouTube, and it was just the most spectacular thing I've ever seen. And then we had a feast, and there was a prasadam eating contest. And back then, everything was cooked in ghee in ISKCON. And the prasadam was fantastic. And the next day, I was on a walk with Tamal Krishna Goswami, and they were trying to figure out what to do with me because I was a minor, and here I was, they had to settle me somehow. So they decided that I would be on the Adikeshava Swami's bus, and I began my life in the Radha Damodar party. I had brought a whole suitcase full of stuff, all my worldly possessions had been narrowed down to this one suitcase. And then Adikeshava took me over to the bus, and I showed him. I said, "This is all my things." And he goes, "Oh, that's all good stuff, but we'll get you down to what can fit in a locker." So I got onto the Radha Damodar bus. At this point, they had 3 buses, and the buses were very nice. They were ornate inside. In Radha Kali Chanji Dham, yesterday for this holiday, a Russian devotee, Hansaduta, had actually built a replica of the Radha Damodar bus, which is amazing, inside the temple room in Dallas. I don't know if you can get a look at that, but that was the bus. And what Tamal Krishna Maharaj had done is turn these buses into temples, And he was a great innovator for Srila Prabhupada. He was in 1967. there was an interview with Tamal Krishna Maharaj in San Francisco, and I don't think he was even initiated yet. And he said that the whole point of Krishna consciousness is to please the spiritual master. And that was his understanding from the very beginning. We have different reasons to join ISKCON, maybe to go, of course, to go back to Godhead, or maybe for wealth or matrimonial service, all the things that ISKCON offers. But from Tamal Krishna Maharaj's point of view, everything was, the secret of success in spiritual life was to please his spiritual master. So he was Srila Prabhupada's right-hand man. And he had come up with, he had a line of successes of organizing Sankirtan all over. And he bought this place here in Mayapur for Prabhupada. And so actually he was the first devotee to come here to Mayapur. The whole project is, he gets the credit for that because he purchased the land and then he went and did the Radha Damodar party, which was to both distribute books and then collect Lakshmi for the Mayapur Dham. So Adhikeshwar shows me, the bus was marble floors, and then there was an altar for Radha Damodar or Gaurnitai on the other two buses. At that time, Panchatattva pictures. And then he says, look, here's your locker. That locker was about as big as a shoebox. And I found out what a brahmachari really means, because to be on the Radha Damodar party, you had to live like a real brahmachari. The way, like it says in Krishna book, the brahmachari has no personal possessions. He only lives for the pleasure of the spiritual master. He has, if the spiritual master doesn't call him for prasadam, he doesn't come. And that's the way we lived. We didn't even really have our own clothes. We used to share kurtas and dhotis. I mean, there was a couple personal items we had, what could fit in the locker. And then began the work. The work was to distribute it back to God. It's like Hari Sari was saying that there's 20,000 Back to Godhead magazines that had to be distributed each month. So Tamal Krishna Maharaj had everybody out. Well, not everybody. Vishnu John Swami was putting on these festivals in universities, and then half the day was for book distribution. So book distribution was most, at least for us, the foot soldiers, was going out and distributing Back to Godhead magazines. We give people incense and a Back to Godhead magazine and get at least $1 for that. Then there was 50 cents profit. And I was doing about 50 Back to Godheads every day. So then Srila Prabhupada was coming to Atlanta, Georgia. So then Tamal Krishna Maharaj brought all the buses and all the Radha Damodar men. At the time, we were maybe about 50 of us at that point. And we all came to Atlanta to see Srila Prabhupada. So that we drove all night, and when we got there, Srila Prabhupada came from his morning walk, and he walked into the front door of the Atlanta temple and lit up the whole place. It was so amazing. Prabhupada was like this orange, like the ball of sun. It just entered into the temple. So, and then I noticed that Prabhupada was really fast, which that was the first thing that impressed me about Srila Prabhupada, was that, I know he was an elderly person, but he was moving and he had more energy than his young disciples. And he wasn't quite touching the ground. It was kind of like a hovercraft. You just zoom along, and then he went into the temple room. I followed behind, and Prabhupada paid his obeisances, and I paid my obeisances. I happened to be right behind him, so I saw his 2 lotus feet and just grabbed onto them for a couple of moments. until he got up and he looked out and he was like, no, it's just some child, I was following him. And then he gave this famous lecture where he was talking about how the mercy of Lord Chaitanya is being distributed to all these people, making them devotees. And Prabhupada started crying and went into a trance. So it was a wonderful weekend with Prabhupada. Prabhupada did an artik for Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati on his appearance day. Prabhupada taught us to play Parama Karuna, and Prabhupada played Madanga. And then it came time for the darshan of the Radha Damodar man, the personal darshan with Tamal Krishna Maharaj and Srila Prabhupada and all of us Radha Damodar men. And this was the first time I got to see Srila Prabhupada and Tamal Krishna Goswami together. We all shaved up and put on our best tilak, and everybody was anxiously awaiting. So once all the men were gathered, Tamal Krishna Goswami brought us up the stairs, and Prabhupada's secretary came out and said, what are you doing? You don't have an appointment. And, you can't just come in and bring all these men into Prabhupada's room, and it's not on the schedule. And Goswami just stood there for a moment and looked at him like, didn't even say anything. And then the secretary was like, oh, okay, I got you. And then Goswami brought us in, and each one of us was introduced to Srila Prabhupada. We all had a flower. We had a rose in our hand. So it came my turn, and he said, this is Bhakta Michael. He joined our party at a young age. And Prabhupada looked at me and said, oh, very nice. I put the flower down, and then we all scrunched into the room. And I could see how Tamal Krishna Goswami and Srila Prabhupada, they've been working together a long time. The relationship was special. Nobody had this relationship with Prabhupada like Goswami did. He'd been his secretary in the GBC of India. So many things they'd already done together. And now he was presenting his men, to Prabhupada, the results of his preaching. And Srila Prabhupada, he talked to us, he said that, I'm always thinking of you boys in the vans. And I really appreciate that you're selling my books and Back to Godhead magazines like you're doing. This is very, very satisfying to myself and all the previous acharyas. And then he told us that we should stay brahmachari if we wanted to save ourselves a lot of trouble. He didn't really say that we had to stay brahmachari. He just said, you'll save yourself a lot of trouble if you don't get married. My Guru Maharaj, he was brahmachari and then took directly to sannyas. And then he said, you have a good leader with Tamal Krishna Goswami. He endorsed him. He said that if you follow him, then I'll be pleased. So we were set then, and then it became March, April, June, 4 more months of real hard work, long days on book distribution. And the party kept on growing. It went from 3 buses to 5 buses. Tripurari Swami merged with the Radha Damodar party. He had all these men that did books in the airports, big books, Chaitanya Charitamritas, Bhagavad Gitas. And then with a flood of 20,000, 30,000 Back to Godhead magazines, more and more Back to Godheads, more and more Lakshmi coming in. And we got to Chicago, and Srila Prabhupada, then he initiated everybody. So Tamal Krishna Maharaj, everybody was, we were all bhaktas. And some of us have been bhaktas for 8 months or a year. Some of us have been bhaktas for like 8 weeks. But everybody got initiated. Prabhupada initiated the entire group, one after the other. It came my opportunity. I came up and Srila Prabhupada looked down at me and he had this set of beads and he said, "Your name is Mishra Bhagavan Das. Just chant Hare Krishna." And handed me the beads. So then Prabhupada installed Gauranitai deities on the buses. Goswami had purchased these brass Gauranitai deities for each bus. So now, instead of Panchatattva pictures, we had actual deities. So the Radha Damodar party at this point was it was a Sankirtan army of 140 men, about 20 vans, 5 buses, and we came all together for this one big picture. Maybe you've all seen this picture. It's fairly famous. All the buses are there, all the men, and Srila Prabhupada in the center. So we went on from Chicago to more just action. It was like Prabhupada was going around the world again. He went around the world twice that year. He was going from one place to another, opening the Krishna Balaram Mandir and Vrindavan. He opened the Denver Temple. So it was a big year for Srila Prabhupada, 1975. Then it went into 1976. And then Tamal Krishna Maharaj became Prabhupada's secretary for that month, January 1976. And on top of everything that Tamal Krishna Goswami was doing, all these, already we built the Lotus building, and there was so much Lakshmi coming, there was so many books being distributed. And then Srila Prabhupada said, "Tamal, I want you to build the longest building in West Bengal. And I want it done by Gaur Purnima." So all of a sudden, Goswami, on top of everything, Prabhupada tells him to build the Chakra building, and he wants it done in 3 months. So there was no slack. And all the men were working really hard. And then we had Vishnu John Swami was here. And then by this time, Jayananda had also entered the party. So the Radha Damodar party now was headed by Tamal Krishna Goswami, Vishnu John Swami, and Jayananda Thakur. So I remember we had to really stay on it. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj was amazing how he ran the traveling Sankirtan party. He would travel and he would be at all the different buses and the vans, and he would give lectures and distribute prasadam. He organized menus, like a winter menu and a summer menu. And of course, everything was cooked in ghee, so all the prasadam was ecstatic. One day, I goofed off a little bit. One devotee told me that, while you're on book distribution, if you feel like you need a little rest, you can go into a department store and catch a little nap on the couches, because during the week people wouldn't really buy furniture much, So I went and tried that, and sure enough, nobody bothered me. I slept for a little bit and came back. And then Tamal Krishna Goswami said to me, "Mishra Bhagavan, your Sankirtan results are unacceptable." Because I had only made like $17.50 that day. And he said that tomorrow it's going to be $100 and 100 back to Godheads, or you're going to be off the party and you'll have to become a temple brahmachari. Now that was considered the greatest disgrace. I mean, because the temple brahmachari we didn't consider them to be really brahmacharis, because they had possessions and they slept in the same place every day. They had their own set of clothes, and maybe a tape recorder and some books. So I really worked hard the next day. It was I didn't slow down a bit. And then I came back. I had $98.50. and Goswami, he gave me a big smile. He said, "That'll do." So I had a good day every day after that. And then they had a program called Dial the Bhajan or Dial the Sauce. And with Dial the Bhajan, you could have Vishnu John Swami sing a song for you over the telephone. And Dial the Sauce was a lecture, a little pep talk by Tamal Krishna Goswami over the telephone. Well, I figured I'd already had enough sauce, so I went for the Dial the Bhajan. So I was out on book distribution in Flint, Michigan, and Vishnu John Swami was back at the bus at the Detroit Temple. And I called from a telephone booth and told, and Vishnu John Swami got on the phone and said, what would you like to hear? This is Vishnu John Swami, Dial a Bhajan. And I said, well, you wrote that tune for Srila Prabhupada's pleasure, the Vrindavan song. This is something you can also find on YouTube. And Prabhupada he said this song's in the songbook and we need a tune for it. So Vishnu John Swami composed a tune for this song. And he pulled the harmonium into the telephone booth and put the telephone on top of the harmonium and sang this song for me over the phone. Vrindavan Ramaya Sthana Divya Chintamanidam, and he's playing the harmonium. I was really happy. And then he told me the translation of the song. It's about Radha and Krishna in Vrindavan, that they sit on a golden throne surrounded by a golden lotus. So they're none other than the 8 principal associates of Radha and Krishna. And in that assembly of Radha and Krishna and their associates, there's a flood of laughter and joking as they address one another. And then he said, this is perfect. And then he told me about someone named Nakula Brahmachari. He said there's a brahmachari that wherever he went, he would manifest Lord Chaitanya within him and give the mercy of Lord Chaitanya. And he said that you should become like that brahmachari. And wherever you go, you give people the mercy of Lord Chaitanya. Let Lord Chaitanya manifest through you. So I went back out on book distribution, feeling quite ecstatic. And then we all worked in this, and it culminated into a big trip to Mayapur in March. Now we're in March 1976. And most of the Radha Damodar men, including Jayananda and Vishnu John Swami, everybody, we got on this airplane, and then Air India hired a whole 747 just for ISKCON. So the whole plane was filled with devotees. And we had RT Srimad Bhagavatam class over the loudspeaker. And the crew was all devotees too. You know, they were like Gujarati, nice Indian people that were also they were also Vaishnavas. So the whole plane was Vaishnava devotees of the Lord. A small set of deities were up in the bubble thing of a 747. And we had these roaring kirtans, and the plane was going up and down. And the ghee lamps are coming down the aisles. Can you imagine that now? You know, big flaming ghee lamps and incense. And it was really quite a trip. We got to Mayapur, and then it was a great time, March 1976. Srila Prabhupada was here, there, and everywhere. And Vishnu John Swami did his famous Leela of asking Srila Prabhupada if he was having some problem keeping with his sannyas and his ex-wife. Something was going on there. And then he asked Prabhupada if it was the right thing for Chodaharidas to have committed suicide in the Ganga. And Prabhupada said, yes, that was the proper thing to do. A sannyasi should be would rather die than go back and eat his own vomit or to give up the order. And then Vishnu John Swami took that literally and Prabhupada went on to say, but if we did that, who would spread this movement? And, I'm not so strict. But Vishnu John Maharaj, he'd already heard enough. And in that morning, he just disappeared on us. Everybody went to breakfast and then we came back and there was no more Vishnu John Maharaj. He'd left his shoes, his passport. It was obvious he didn't go back to America. And he disappeared. So things were changing. And then the next day, or within the next couple of days, a lot of the householders that Tamal Krishna Maharaj, like about 2/3 of the party was devotees like myself who had bailed out of the temple and joined the Radha Damodar party. And then most of the grihastas running the temples weren't very happy about this, and they went to Srila Prabhupada and they said, something's got to be done. So Prabhupada said to Tamal Krishna Maharaj, all these people are complaining, like, what should I do? So then he said, well, Prabhupada, maybe I should just go to China. And Prabhupada said, yes, that's exactly what you should do. So then that launched Tamal Krishna Maharaj on the China mission. And then it was time for the morning walk after that Mangal Arti. And I snuck onto the morning walk, which I had done a couple times, because only the sannyasis and the GBC were supposed to be on the morning walks. But I really liked to slide onto the morning walk. So I was on this one. And we went up the stairs to the roof of the Lotus building. And Prabhupada faced the assembly, and he was walking backwards, and he opened up his arms. He had his bead bag and his cane, and he, with a big smile on his face, he said, you'll all be happy to know Tamal is going to China. And I'll end with that story. I could talk about Tamal Krishna Goswami the rest of the afternoon, but I'll just say that he was Prabhupada's right-hand man, that when Prabhupada wanted anything done, Prabhupada would have Tamal Krishna Maharaj, who was the one to make it happen. Like Madhavisha Prabhu said one time that you can't really talk about Prabhupada's pastimes without including Tamal Krishna Maharaj. Like my friend Sarvadrik was saying the other day that you can't talk about Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati without mentioning A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, the founder Acharya, the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. And similarly, you can't really discuss the history of ISKCON and Srila Prabhupada without glorifying his divine grace, Srila Tamal Krishna Goswami. Thank you, Hare.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you very much for the nice talk. Okay. I would like to invite Ridhar Prabhu to His Grace, Ridhar Prabhu, to come forward and speak. And now onwards, I was requested to suggest devotees who are speaking to give some small talk because we are running out of time. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Vikyana Timaranja Sajananjana Salakaya. Chaksumalitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Nama Om Vishnu Vidaya Krishna Prasthai Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swamini Namane. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Puchanini. Nivesesha Sanjavadi Paskachat Disitarani. Thank you. So inspiring to hear Hari Suri speak as Satadanya Mr. Gaur Bhagavan. It's very uplifting. I will just speak a few words and my recollections of Tamal Krishna Goswami. My first interaction with him is actually not in person, but reading his articles. Because although he may have been an expert manager, organizer, GBC, whatever, he's also and was a very good writer. And I was just looking at some previous Back to Godhead magazines, which he was promoting. I think it was 1975, December edition. It's a bluish BTG with a yogi sitting, and inside that BTG is an article written by Tamal Krishna. And if I'm not mistaken, he may have been sannyasa, may not have been, but he was the author. And as a book distributor, we were given vast amounts of books to distribute. And I recall distributing those books on the basis of the conviction of his articles. I specifically remember. And if you can get hold of that magazine, and you can get the PDF online, he explains about why India became industrialized and gave up Vedic culture. And it was so nicely presented. And I always remember that. In any case, in his early days, I was also taken back by his determination when there was a dock strike. It must have been around about 1972 in India. A dock strike. And if anybody knows anything about strikes, they can go on for a long time. And Prabhupada had just received a shipment from Dai Nippon, I suppose. I think it was the Krishna book. And Tamal Krishna took it upon himself to go to the minister in charge of that area. And he convinced the minister to release the shipment of books. So when I heard about this story, of course, I don't have all the finer details. Some of you may know more than me. I was very, very convinced about his determination and his sincerity, completely convinced. In any case, we interacted in Chicago when I was there with Tripurari, with the BBT at the airport. And he called me into his room and he wanted me, I was a brahmachari, he wanted me to be trained up as a sannyas. He mentioned it briefly. And then later on, when I was with Pusta Krishna, he said, well, I thought you were going to take sannyas, Rida. What is this wearing of cloth? So I didn't see him for a long time. But in 1976, I was here in Mayapur at the temple president's meeting on the Lotus building. It was a GBC temple president's meeting. So I was there. And Srila Prabhupada was pounding and telling him and ordering him to go to China? And he said, no. And Prabhupada said, yes, you're going to China. He said, no. Prabhupada said, you're going to China. He said, yeah, I suppose I'll have to go. So eventually, he couldn't get out of it. And he may have even gone back to America to get out of it. But he prepared himself, and eventually he went to China. So for most devotees, rank and file devotees, going to an atheistic country will be out of the question. Some devotees were asked, Prabhupada, why are you going to Africa? Prabhupada says, if you don't go, I will go myself. So, but it didn't get to that point with China. So Tamal Krishna Maharaja's expertise was so good, he didn't rock the boat and preach with too much zealousness, as many devotees used to do. They would go into different countries and rock the boat. Tamal Krishna Maharaj was very delicate, articulate, intelligent, and methodical how he did things. He was the first person to go and preach in China. So it's very commendable. Then later in his life, I met him again while he was in so yeah, later in his life, while he was semi-retired, one might say, he went to Cambridge and he sat there and did a thesis and excelled tremendously. And on one occasion, before he actually went there, he came to the manor, Bhaktivedanta Manor, and he held a great big meeting with all the devotees, and he told us everything about preaching in China, how difficult it was, and how cautious one would have to be. Then later, during his studies, he came down to the manor, Bhaktivedanta Manor, for Tribhuvanath's departure, of which I was the MC. And he sat at the back. So I asked him, please come forward, Maharaj, I would like you to speak. He said, no, I haven't come here to speak. I've come here to learn about great Vaishnavas like Tribhuvanath. So that was great. And then the program went on, and he asked me, look, rid of the programs. We need to take prasadam. Come and sit with me and take prasadam. So that's what I did. And I thought that was very humble of him. And he entered a different phase of his life. He was becoming more mellow and more humble and more introspective. Tamal Krishna Maharaj ki jai.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much for being here. And today is a very special day for us. In 2001, when Srila Tamal Krishna Goswami came to Calcutta, and he was very happy with the youth preaching that was going on. And he said that we should have a cultural group, because he said Bengalis are very cultural. And Bengal, West Bengal, especially Calcutta, is called the cultural capital of India. And he said that Prabhupada told him that we should conquer the world through cultural conquest. And he said the Vaishnav, the Gauriya Vaishnav tradition has not only the best philosophy, but such an amazing culture. And he wanted a cultural group which can present the culture of Gauriya Vaishnavism to the whole world. So we had this in mind, and with that, somehow or other, by his divine arrangements, we got this small group of devotees who have started chanting, taking up Krishna consciousness very seriously. And they're all professional dancers. They're all young college students, and they're professional. They travel around the world. Not all, few of them go to Dubai, Nepal, and they perform, and they get paid for this performance. And now they're taking up Krishna consciousness, and they want to use their talent in the service of the Vaishnavas and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So we approached His Grace Jananivas Prabhu for a name of her group. And after long discussion yesterday, he gave the name Gauranga Nataraj Dance Troupe. And the purpose will be for to dance for the pleasure of Radha Madhav, Panchatattva, Sri Sri Radha Madhav, Sri Sri Panchatattva, Nishinga Bhagavan Prahlad Maharaj, and the Vaishnavas, and also use this to preach Krishna consciousness as much as possible. So we are actually starting this group, and we need the blessings of all the Vaishnavas here, all of you. And for that blessings, they're going to perform a small dance based on the song Ohe Vaishnava Thakura here. And for the pleasure of Srila Tamal Krishna Goswami Maharaj, who wrote Jagannath Priya Natakam, the first English drama based on Natya Shastra, the ancient Vedic Natya Shastra. It's about how to write a drama based on the principles of Natya Shastra. So here we present Gauranga Nataraj Dance Troupe performing Ohe Vaishnav Thakur. Just few minutes. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. I would introduce you. First starts with Sonu. He's expert in Kathak. He's an expert in Kathak. Then we have Rohit. He's expert in hip hop, the modern dance form, hip hop. But he also knows classical, but he's expert in hip hop. And we are going to use fusion hip hop and in a future dance program. And we have Sania. She's expert in Kathakali, Bharatnatyam, and Manipuri. And then we have Priya. She's expert in Western. She's Western hip hop. And then we have Prithviraj and classical. He's classical Bharatnatyam dancer. And we have others who didn't perform. This is Vidya. Please come in front. Vidya, Seema, and then Priyanka. Please come forward and get the blessings of all the Vaishnavas here. Vidya, this is Priyanka and Seema. Seema just finished her high school and she got distinction. Here, Seema, come forward. She got lettered. She got one of the topmost. She ranked one of the best in her subject in geography. So special applause to Seema. With all the dance, she did so good with her exams. She just finished her high school. Hare Krishna.
Now, can I invite His Grace Chaitanya Chandra Prabhuji, our senior god brother. He's a disciple of Srila Gurudev. He's from Dallas. So please welcome. Thank you very much for coming. Hare Krishna.
नमः ओम विष्णुपदाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदांत स्वामीति नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणी नमः ओम विष्णुपदाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते तमाल कृष्ण गोस्वामीति नामिने वाञ्छा कल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः. Hare Krishna, everybody. I came here in Mayapur after a long time, and this is my good fortune that I am here for celebrating Vyasa Puja of my Guru Maharaj here. First, I met my Guru Maharaj in 1978 in Bombay, Juhu. That time I was just new bhakta, just after Srila Prabhupada's departure from Vrindavan, Prabhupada Samadhi. I was introduced by Jashomatinandan Prabhu to Viraj Maharaj, and I went with Amoglila Prabhu in Bombay, Juhu, and I stayed there. After only few months, we had good fortune to have association with my Guru Maharaj. That time, I was new bhakta only, but I had good opportunity to talk with him. As all the senior Vaishnavas, they explain about my Guru Maharaj. That is before I joined. And after Srila Prabhupada, I had good fortune to be with my Guru Maharaj in so many different occasions. Bombay, Vrindavan, Mayapur. In 1979, in Mayapur, here only in Lotus Building, he was having room there. And he said that you coming to Fiji. Then I was not knowing what is Fiji even. I was not having passport also. But then everything was arranged, and I went there. Prior to that, in Juhu, I had very good conversation with my Guru Maharaj, because I was not speaking English that time. I was born in Gujarat, so generally Gujarati people, they don't speak good English very well. They feel shy. So I asked my Guru Maharaj that why don't you learn Hindi so I can understand, we can have conversation. Then my Guru Maharaj said, why don't you learn English? Then I said, how I can learn? He said, very simple. Just you read Srila Prabhupada's all the books, step by step, everything. And whatever you don't understand, you write down the words and you ask other devotees, they will explain you. This I have learned to speak in English. And after that, when I went to Fiji, my Guru Maharaj had every evening program there. In different villages I used to organize, very small villages. Mostly people, they speak Hindi. So my duty was, when Guru Maharaj when speaking English, I translate in Hindi. So that was also a wonderful experience in Fiji. And after that, I went to Hong Kong also, and I had lots of association with my Guru Maharaj in Hong Kong. So one time, it's a very instructive thing. 2 different occasions he explained that as a devotee, as a pracharak, we're supposed to be very good exemplary. When we represent Srila Prabhupada, we have to be very, very careful. Never just go and beg. You present philosophy, give prasadam, give some gift from the temple, but never ask any money. If they ask, shall I give you something? They say, no. That was in Bombay. So we are representing Srila Prabhupada, and our duty is to give in a pure form of Krishna consciousness. We are not beggars. We are giving valuable thing for every human being. Most important thing, Krishna consciousness. So this is very important thing. And another occasion in Fiji, there was 2 different devotees had disagreement, and he gave very instructive advice. That advice is good for each and every one of us. He said that just you image that in whole world there is no ISKCON temple, there is no ISKCON books, and you are going to present Srila Prabhupada, how are you going to behave? So that's very important instruction, that we have to be very cooperative with each other, and we have to be thoroughly expert student of Srila Prabhupada's books. If we do this, then we can do much, much more what we are doing right now also. Also, there is many different occasions. I was with Srila Prabhupada, Srila Gurudev in Hong Kong. He used to come very often. And we had lots of discussion also. And another thing, I used to cook for him. So I was very fortunate that I was having personal association. Whatever he likes, I used to prepare for him. And today is a very special occasion for me with my all God brothers and God sisters, all the senior Vaishnavas, that I'm able to be with you all people. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhuji. His Grace Chaitanya Chandra Prabhu ki jai. Hare Krishna. Thank you. Thank you everyone for coming. Now we are going to wind up with this program and from here only. And we are going to the Samadhi for Pushpanjali and Bhoga offering, Pushpanjali and Aarti. So please everyone, we can move to Gurudev Samadhi now. Thank you. Thank you. Hare Krishna.